Harbor Avenue and 13th, and there was maybe 20 full-time employees at the time, and it was very much a, close-knit group of people. And I had come, and the company started in '79. I got there, I was there in '95, and it was still very much the same. So there's a history that was established and cadence and culture well before I got there, and but it's been neat to some of the people that I started working with at the time are still here, and we've worked together for 20 years. So
wow,
yeah, there's a lot of tenure here. If you look at our senior management team, there's 5 of us, and I think we're just at about 100 years of experience here at Global.
Wow.
I think I think I'm third tenure. When you look at it that way, I've been here for just about 21 years, and our baby Trinity, who Jerry works for, has been here for 13, I think.
Wow.
She's the newest.
But that speaks a lot too about what you have here.
Well, it is, and then if you look at the broader guys in the field, or our other managers, or the rest of our management team, it's we have a healthy blend of new, because we've grown quite a bit in the last 8 to 10 years. But Aaron Harrington, who's our Pacific Northwest general manager, he started I think 9 months after I did. We've worked together, and he's been here for 20 years, and so it's neat to see that tenure, because there's a connection both to the trade and to our company.
To the company,
yeah,
sure.
I think we do things a little differently. So
yeah, that's something you should be very proud of.
No, we're very proud of it. Something that you sometimes take for granted, and you forget how important that is. That the connectivity to each other, and the institutional knowledge that's born out of this place.
Oh yeah.
A lot of our decisions now are rooted in, long ago culture and decisions that we made years ago, and sometimes you forget that there's a continuity of that. That you sometimes have to kind of explain to new people. Well, why the hell would you do something that way? And you go, well, because and it's not just because we've always done it that way. Yeah. It's because here's the story of why we look at this way, because this is what happened, and because the company is still, the original founders are still owners. There's 2 that are still connected, and we're not a professionally managed company. We never would call ourselves that. We're still a very closely held company. We're private, and so a lot of those decisions is kind of the on-the-job training and institutional knowledge that gets passed on. That kind of tribal mentality of here are the stories, here's how we do things, here's why we do them, and now you go do them. Sure. So it's important. We're not quite wrapped up in policies and procedures to the level we probably should be. So having that longevity of tenure, and a lot of people have worked here a long time, really is an important piece of who we are. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're not we don't own a lot of, we have a lot of floating assets, we have a lot of equipment, but that's not our service. Our service is our people. We have really talented craftsmen and tradesmen, and if we didn't have those people, then we're just a bunch of equipment. We're a rental shop at that point, and that's not who we are. So having that connectivity to our people is really important.
In the years you've been involved, has the industry changed? You mentioned about this is a kind of a blue collar profession with a real pride of craft, and this is since a lot of things in other parts of life were like craft is kind of disappearing, and we have
it is so it just in my time there has been there's not an emphasis on, I think, vocational skills. So we're not any different than other kind of, I would say, more aging monolithic industries that have kind of got a potential turnover that's coming. There is a generational gap, and I think it's also just part of the challenge of trying to find engagement points for younger generations on how they can contribute and be part of a different sector that they don't see on TV.
Right.
It takes a lot of time for people to be gifted at their craft, to be a good welder or a good diver. And one of the things about being a diver is diving is just a mode of getting to your job site. The skills are not diving. The skills are welding, rigging, mechanical inclinations, engineering, the skill sets you bring with you to the,
Sure.
The helmet's just a car. I get to work driving my car. A diver gets to work in a helmet. So the diving's not the profession, right? And that's a really big point. And I think there's just, I think, I don't want to sound like an aging Gen Xer, but I think, trying to engage kids that are younger and excitement about what I would consider to be, or at least what I think what the community and outside perception, or outside public sees as a blue collar job. I think it's challenging to kind of recruit from a recruitment standpoint. We're pretty fortunate that there's some good programs here locally that kind of help engage kids both at a high school level and try to provide, we've got some good academies around here, both the Divers Institute of Technology is in Ballard. They're one of the best known dive schools in the country, and they're right in our backyard. You've got the Seattle Maritime Academy that just was part of the community college program. That's a great program for kids wanting to get involved in topside to become a mariner. You've got Ton Point down in Astoria. So you've got some really great programs out there, but I just don't think we do enough to promote that. I think there's kind of a stigma with wanting to go and work with your hands.
Sure.
And there's opportunities for people, both vocational and college educated kids, to get into this trade. That is a big challenge. I also think that you've seen a real professionalization of the maritime industry, and certainly the dive community over time. I think there's a lot of one of the things that I've seen that's changed in my time is I think commercial diving was always looked at as kind of a means to fix something. And what we've really focused on here from our construction side and mostly on our construction trade is to kind of work with owner and operators to kind of show the constructability issues on what can be done proactively. Some of the cleaner things are 25, 30 years ago it was unusual for there to be a camera on top of a diver.
Yeah.
Right. It was really had a lot to do with it was really a trade where the client had to trust the diver because at least when Global started, there were no cameras. So a diver would come and he would give verbal, a description of something to a tender and to the supervisor, and then he'd get out of the water and he would talk to the owner and say, here's what you have. And there was a level of trust there that was really, really important. And one of our core values is honesty and integrity and trust. And that's something that I think that probably is on almost every company's core values. Sure. But for us, it means something very different because our humble beginnings were you would have to hop up topside and say, hey, client, you need to dry dock your boat. Here's what I found. Or you gotta walk in your shaft, and I think you need to pull it because it may not last much longer. That's a really expensive decision that they have to make.
Sure.
And if you're not accurate, and if you're not a professional, or if you're not, being absolutely truthful, your word didn't go very far. You did.
Oh yeah. You
would be known as somebody who wasn't really good at your profession. With the advent of cameras and some of the side scan sonar techniques and some of the subsurface bathymetry and other surveying tools that are available, it really helps, I think, complement what is a manned effort on the bottom or in the water. And we view it as a compliment. Some people look at, oh geez, you have ROVs, a remotely operated vehicle, and the camera, does that change things? And I think it's a benefit. There is still work that needs to be done that's not going to be done unmanned. Because the advantage of having a diver on the bottom is somebody who can think on their toes, because that's really the skill set they bring. They've got a problem, they're by themselves. They have to address the situation themselves. You can't just come up, whether you're working on a bottom timetable or not, you can't just pop upstairs and say, hey, here's what I got, what do you think? You're in water, you may have decompression issues and you've got 35 minutes to figure this out, because if you don't, you just burned your dive and you're going to be in the pot for the next 4 hours and they got to splash the next guy. So I think there's been some real good complementary developments in technology that help kind of help provide a communication vehicle for our clients. At the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, our clients are never going to touch or see what we do. Period. I mean, they're certainly not gonna touch it.
Yeah.
They might see it. And so any means by which we can help describe that and help kind of try to visualize that. I mean, you know, there's a lot of interesting 3D modeling and stuff that we use now when we deal with our casualty response side, where you're going, well, here's what the diver sees, and we can physically model it, give it a list, and show the embedment it has on the bottom, or challenges, or being able to work into an infrastructure for having to tap into doing, you know, pulling some fuel in situ off of a vessel. You know, before you just go, it's a real pain in the ass, it's gonna be a challenge, but now you can visually render something
Sure.
and provide a snapshot for someone to go, no, this is the challenge, and they can go, oh, I see, you gotta go here and then run in there and you gotta cut a hole there. So, so there's, you know, there's been some changes that way. The other thing that's happening is that you're seeing a lot more infrastructure, which is typically what we work on, is that's new, that's being put in place, whether it's a dam or an offshore oil platform, or, you know, the seawall project down here. A lot of forethought's been being put into long-term maintenance and retrofit designs that could be done manless, which I think is, you know, on one hand, it kind of changes the complexion of the work for us, or maybe it's, you know, eventually working us out of a profession, but the recognition that when they put these things in, they're gonna have a lifespan of 50 to 75 years, and, you know, how can they minimize the routine inspection, repair, and maintenance that occurs, and if you do have to perform that, can you do it manless, can you do it with ROVs, and can you limit the amount of manned subsea time, the dive time, which I think is a great step forward. But then, tongue in cheek, we always joke internally that most of the time when engineers try to figure out a diverless solution to an issue, it usually creates more work for us. And I think it's just because there's something about having somebody who can physically put their hands on something and be able to fix issues or perform their operations. So we always joke about that. We're a big fan of trying to what we call underwater constructability conversations with our clients, and there is a lot of preparatory work that can be done to eliminate wet time, is what we call it, because it's expensive.
Oh, sure.
And especially when you get into bottom tables at depth, you really run into some expenses because of the turnover you have on the bottom. In essence, trying to keep somebody working continually at a depth because of decompression issues. We love having those conversations, and typically they manifest themselves either in a really successful project where they don't have much bottom time, or it results in more than they would have had otherwise, because what we typically see is that when you're working with engineers that really don't understand the marine trade, is that number one, if you're trying to set something topside, it's very dynamic. It's not like trying to set up a concrete panel in downtown Seattle. And the other thing is the tolerances that they're used to working with when you're dealing with dry engineers, is that if somebody says, well, we want it within 1/8 of an inch tolerance, that's perfectly fine when you're dry fitting something. But if you're underwater and your crane's moving around because you got a 2-foot swell and you got a diver who's trying to fit something with some tight tolerances, it doesn't work so well. So that's another way that the industry has changed, because there is a lot more look at how you can put in infrastructure offshore. There's great projects with some of the renewable energy stuff, with tidal energy and wind and wave. So there's some new interesting things that aren't just oil based, but you've got wind turbines, subsea wind turbines, and or current turbines, and so there's interesting places where the industry's going, and that again kind of calls itself into people who are skilled tradesmen to go work in these kind of really dynamic places.
And with the feeder programs you mentioned, are enough people still coming in, or do you see like in 20 years the industry's going to have a real problem when people start retiring?
The greater maritime trade, yes, it is a problem. There's a lot of captains. There's just a lot of people who aren't used to going to sea and really, and although there are a lot more conveniences, the internet and being able to Skype, I think it's catching up to some of those challenges. But at the end of the day, no, there's not enough people going into the trade. whether it's running a boat, spending time on a barge. You know, we see, you know, probably DIT, the Divers Institute of Technology, would be a better medium to ask if we're getting divers in. But I do know that our challenge is finding good divers.
Really?
It's a tough trade. There's you know, we kind of see that there's a burnout. You know, people will go to school, it's expensive, the equipment's expensive, and you know, I don't know, you know, to me it seems like the really good divers are in it for a period of time, you know, years.
Sure.
But there's a lot of people 3 or 4 years in and realize that it's tough, and it takes you know, I have to give a lot of credit and have the utmost amount of respect for commercial divers, because it is a tough trade. I mean, when you recuse, you know, when you know, eliminate the hours and the times and the conditions, because it's, you know, up in Alaska we're diving, we're breaking through ice to dive, you've got guys working in a current, I mean, just, and the challenges to raising family or having a spouse, and it's pretty demanding. But at the end of the day, they're typically by themselves on the bottom.
Sure.
I mean, it is less lonely and more, you better be really good at what you better be really good at what you do, and you better be able to solve problems, and you better be able to think for yourself, and that's something that I think is kind of a difficult find when you're trying to match it up with somebody who wants to go into the diving industry.
Sure.
Because again, lots of people can dive.
Yeah.
You can go get your helmet, and you can go get your certification, you can go blow bubbles, but going down and being able to fit a open spelter socket into a pin assembly when you got a couple of crowbars and some chain falls and you're at 210 feet. And you know, if you burn this dive, it's a $2,000 cost to the client or the company, and then the guy behind you needs it. You know, if you're not comfortable with that type of stress